Welcome to Net Impact, the podcast that demystifies and explores the influence of cybersecurity and cybercrime across the world and into our lives. Brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Here's your host and guide to the digital world, Fred Menachem.
Welcome back to Net Impact. As always, I'm your host, Fred Menachem, and today I'm particularly excited. I believe this is our fifth, maybe our sixth recording or seventh. I'm not quite sure, but this is one that's particularly exciting for me. I'm to introduce our guest, Barbara Massa. Now, Barbara is really just so cool. She was actually, what were you drinking just now, Barbara? LaCroix?
I have my LaCroix right here.
Right, LaCroix, yep. Excuse me, right. We were talking about, and as I get off track, I said I have coffee. So besides that, she's pretty damn cool. We're going to talk a little bit later about her being a soccer player and all that, but she has 25 years experience in the tech world, and she's done really everything from startups to Fortune 500 companies. And we're going to really hear more later about what she did even before that, a bit about her life. But she serves now as the partner and chief operating officer of NightDragon. And for those folks, I don't know how anybody doesn't know who NightDragon is, but NightDragon is the leading venture capital firm really for cybersecurity and tech as well, but specifically for cybersecurity, safety, and privacy. And we are, as ThriveDX, we're really, really proud to be under NightDragon's portfolio, and they work really closely with us to accelerate industry partnerships and cultivate long-term paths for growth. And most importantly, as I said earlier, forget the rest of it. Barbara is a phenomenal soccer player. We're going to get into that a bit later. What I wanted to ask you is, can you tell us or tell the audience a little bit about what NightDragon is, and really, frankly, why is it so important in the world of cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. So, NightDragon, let me just start there. We are an investment and advisory firm, and you said it exactly right, Fred. We are market specific, and we are in the world of cybersecurity, safety, and privacy, and maybe what you'd broadly refer to as secure.
Sure.
Kind of the broad moniker that we call it. And so, with that, we've got obviously investments that we make, and we're a growth stage investor. So we're typically looking at companies that are on that scale path. They're looking to grow, they're looking to scale. And so that's kind of, one specific area that obviously NightDragon spends a lot of time in. The second piece is we also have NightDragon Advisory. And this is where we have the kind of power that we've built of what's called the NightScale platform that we can bring to bear either for those companies that we have invested in and deployed capital into, or those companies that might honestly not be in fundraising mode. They might not need it, but they want access to the NightDragon portfolio of capabilities. So government relationships. Clearly, we have an incredible CEO and founder in Dave DeWalt, who in the world of cyber is exceptionally well known and respected around the world. And so that kind of cadre brings with it a lot of doors and avenues that we are able to help bring to bear. We've got exceptional capabilities in helping companies scale their go-to-market, their partnerships, their strategic partnerships. We have M&A advisory capabilities, talent and skill-based capabilities. So whether you're part of NightDragon growth and we invest, or you're part of NightDragon Advisory, I like to say we treat all of our children the same. So that's kind of how we bring the power of NightDragon forth into this market segment.
You guys have an amazing group of advisors, of NightDragon advisors, that represent so many companies, so many facets. Some come from national security background, from corporate. So I called folks and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a NightDragon advisor. Oh yeah, and I was like, well, and so I say all of that because it's amazing what you guys have done to really bring the cybersecurity community together. And like I said, 6 years ago, I knew nothing about it. Now I know too much about it, but I've quietly watched your trajectory and NightDragon's trajectory and Dave's trajectory. And I just wanted to say it's really amazing what you all are doing. So
thank you. You've touched on a really important element, the
Sure.
CISO advisory network that we
Right.
built at NightDragon. And really credit to, Dave and Amy DeSalvatore, a fellow partner here, and Morgan and Ken for, having the foresight to really build that. And you're right, we've got over 100 of the absolute best in cyber as advisors to NightDragon. So lots of good stuff there. And we're really grateful for their partnership and their impact on our companies, and certainly on the world of cyber every day.
1,000%, 1,000%. So I know that you grew up in Silicon Valley, much different Silicon Valley than the Silicon Valley we see of today, I imagine. Actually, I know that. And when you were a kid, it was really just, I mean, I'm embellishing here, but orchids and fields. But actually, in many ways, it was more quiet. Certainly we didn't have the tech world, of what it was today. So how did you end up in the cybersecurity industry?
Yeah,
Right,
that's a great
right.
question.
That's
And actually,
a loaded question,
yeah.
right? Right, right, right,
And you're
right.
not too far off.
Mm,
I grew up in Cupertino, and literally down the street from my house was an orchard, and it was
sure.
literally strawberry fields and cherry fields and lots of that. So that is exactly what surrounded Silicon Valley. Kind of coming up through my early years. Was the advent of the likes of Fairchild Semiconductor. Apple Computer was just starting, some real incredible companies, the likes of Intel. So, I think I love Silicon Valley for all of the idea and invention and, what has been born here for so many incredible, successful companies that have ultimately made incredible global impact. But as it relates to, kind of cybersecurity and, how did we go from orchards and fields to the world of cyber?
Right.
Honestly, I tripped my way into cybersecurity. And, I got my start in it actually in technology first. I worked for a great company called Cadence Design Systems, electronic design automation. And then made some really important relationships with a couple of key executives at that organization. And we can talk a little bit more about this, but I ultimately then, followed them to a couple of other companies. And therein lied my first introduction to a person by the name of Dave DeWalt. And with
Who's
that
that
kind of
guy? Wait, I'm sorry?
who's that
Right,
guy? Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Have you heard of his
right,
background
exactly. Right,
before?
right.
Um, and he went to, a company, little known company called McAfee, which, at its time was, an absolute behemoth player in
Sure.
enterprise and consumer security. And, my world kind of having come up through talent and people and culture and workforce development, when those two married, in the world of cyber and people and talent, boy, did I just fall in love with cyber. But it was not intentional, and I really did kind of trip my way into it, if you will, because it wasn't a predetermined career path. Now I like to pitch, everybody should find their way into a career in cyber, but we can talk more about
We just fell into it, and I'm really, I'm so happy I did. And then I think, the same thing for you, it sounds like. It's,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's such a good point, and I think for so many of the folks who might be listening and either A, thinking about a career in cyber or being in cyber today if you've already experienced it. But one of the standouts for me, and Fred, I think you and I talked about this as well, is it's such a mission orientation to the work. And whether you are in, the journalistic side of cyber and or you're in marketing or you're in people or you're in hardcore engineering or you're selling or you're part of a security team, all of those when applied to the world of cyber, um, what really struck with me is the mission and how important our mission was and its application to the safety and security of our technology, our lives, our worlds, our nations around the globe. And I like to say that when you kind of get hooked by the cyber bug, it's because
Yeah.
it's mission first. I like being around people who are mission first in how they look at the world. And it's like what makes my heart beat a little faster and the pulse quicken is just how important the work is. And that's really what it's meant to me. And I think people who choose to have a sustained career in cyber would probably agree with me about what it means to them too.
I did want to speak to you about something that's really near and dear to my heart. So, networking and relationships. And I know I'm asking how important. I already know that, but they've been pretty important in your career. And I think, it's a very important thing for everybody to focus on. But, how important are they to someone who's considering a career in cyber? outside of yourself, what would you tell those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, my goodness, it's important. I mean, let's just start there. And I think, so often the word networking almost has a little bit of a negative connotation to it, because
Sure,
you just sort of think about like a trade room show floor, and how many hands do I have to go shake to network, and
sure,
and so forth. And I know, if I just look again at kind of my personal career trajectory, I mentioned that very early in my career, here I started out, 25, 30 years ago, and, had the opportunity to have my work be seen, and, my work ethic be seen by, some senior leaders in the organization, who then went on to go do things at other companies. And if you're purposeful about the relationship building, and you continually, work to not just have it be, hey, what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? People generally want to continue those fruitful relationships and exchanges. And so when individuals then that you have a positive, situation with, go and do something else, you are by virtue likely to be pretty high in their mind as they think about staffing their companies and what opportunities might exist there. So it's a really purposeful relationship kind of curation over time. And that ultimately then led to, me joining a company that then led to Dave joining a company actually a little bit after I did. And then we then kind of went and in partnership across the next 25 years and went and did a bunch of things together. Didn't mean it was exactly always at the same time,
sure.
but there's a basis of understanding of what someone's capability is. You're aligned in values, you're aligned in work ethic, you're aligned in, capability. And so that piece is what I really mean by purposeful networking. Um, it's not just about it's about the quality of the relationships that you continue to cultivate as you move companies, as are parts of associations professionally, as you're parts of sports teams, as you're at barbecues, as you're talking to, friends of your kids, family members, and things of that nature. It's all an opportunity to show up and deepen and develop relationships.
I just think this is so important because so many people, I don't think people are disingenuous. I think people just don't understand how to connect with people. And I think if there's anything in this world besides integrity and ethics that matters, is our relationships. And as you said, Dave and you are at different points, but sort of always, right? Always sort of in each other's like faces in a good way. When you were younger, you were a serious soccer player, right?
Yep,
And
yep,
and in the fields and orchids of Silicon Valley, right? So
yep,
right. So
indeed.
what lessons, abilities, all the traits, first of all, did you have to cultivate, to be a soccer player? And I imagine that, obviously you've carried those on into professional life and personal life, I'm sure all of it. So if you want to break that down, I know that was a lot, and I'll let you sort of speak to that though.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to also, how I tripped my way into the world of cyber and my career. But yeah, I mean,
Literally tripped, right?
literally
Right,
tripped. Yeah.
exactly, right. Right.
Um, yeah, all I wanted to do growing up was play soccer. I mean, it was the sport I zeroed in on very early on, played at a quite high level. I mean, when I was young, we didn't have just, girl only teams. We had girl boy teams and mixed. And so I play a lot with the boys, and we didn't have, women's professional leagues at the time, but had the opportunity to play at a quite high level. And, had a verbal commitment to, play soccer in college, and unfortunately had a major collision on the soccer field and ended up having an injury that took that away. And I was an okay student, but honestly, I got the grades I got because I wanted to be able to keep playing the sport I loved. And so when my life turned very quickly, and soccer was not something that was in front of me, there was obviously all the the physical need to rehab myself, and actually get back to being able to run and heal from the injury and all of that. But it was a very early lesson in a heck of a lot of resilience and a heck of a lot of grit, and a lot of, okay, I can't be woe is me, I want to get on with my life. And actually is literally the big push that I followed into working full time at that very early stage in my life. And so it was just sort of a mental switch going, my goodness, if I can't play the sport that I love, let's get on with it and let's go, make this whole thing called life start happening and start working full time. And so when you ask, kind of some of those traits and
Sure.
connections and characteristics, I really come back to so much of the lessons in sport and on the field. Again, I mentioned a couple of them. You don't win every game. In fact, most of the time, you don't win. And
Right.
how do you lose? How do you lose gracefully? How do you support your teammates and those around you? What role do you play on the field and on any given day? Sometimes you got to be the person to go put the ball in the net and score. And sometimes you got to go sit at the back and make sure no one else scores and play defense. Sometimes you got to distribute the ball from the middle of the field and give it to other people to go put the ball in the net. And, I think all of those elements, I can draw so much correlation to leadership and how that shows up, throughout my career and certainly then culminating as being an executive of a company. So, Fred, we could probably have our own podcast on just that topic alone.
Well, Barbara, maybe we should. And I speak for myself. I don't like to speak for other people, but I feel like you have the same line of thinking. It's great to have technical skills. And I wasn't in school. I didn't take it so seriously. I was in politics. I would like when I was a kid. I was reading books that the teachers couldn't read. But my point being is that we tend to focus often, and it's important on hard skills, tech. But the reality is this: you can have all those skills all day long, and I hate to say this, a dime a dozen. Serious. I mean, dime a dozen. If you're not going to do it, somebody else is going to learn and get educated. And I'm not saying that doesn't. I don't want to dismiss people who are brilliant and have those tech skills, but what I'm trying to say is that it's resilience. I know a thing or two about resilience, and that's what makes us different, because resilience gives us empathy for others. Resilience makes us, really look at our own selves and hopefully not be in the situations we were in before or learn from them. And we talked about networking, resilience, relationships. And if I just wanted to, implore folks that are listening that, look, it doesn't matter what the industry is, cybersecurity, it doesn't matter if it's your relationship with your son, your friends, but resilience and relationships. And I think what I'm getting at, because I'm a bit, all over the place, is that we're in this world, at least I believe this, not just to be successful financially and all that. It's to leave something to others. And our experience, when we're willing to be open about it and share that with others, that's what really makes that success, and it helps other people become successful. So my point was that I just think that, first of all, I admire you for that. I'm sure that I imagine that after that happened, there's some depression and all of that. I don't want to say that. Well, depression might not be the word, but, it's upsetting. And I assume I'm correct, right, Barbara? I mean, it's not easy to go through that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you sort of go through a very fast reevaluation of what's possible,
Sure.
and the sorrow, if you will, and grief around you've
Yeah.
lost something that's been a really big part. And I'm also an eternal optimist. And I think that element, and I don't mean that in a sort of Pollyanna way, like you just get to walk around and be like, yay, I'm just happy. And, I think for me, it was just a choice of being very intentional about wanting to be optimistic about the future, being optimistic about what I was capable of doing. And, moving through being, sad about what wasn't and being excited about what is possible. But that is an intentional decision, that and I think many people around this world have to make on a daily basis. So I don't want to, speak light of that, because it is a big one.
I remember the first guy when I was working for the mayor. It was in my late 20s, and Miami-Dade County, and he just wrote a book. I was fortunate to be in 6 pages, but he was opening doors late night at a hotel, overnight shift. One day I said, "Hey, you want a job?" He's like, "I'll take it." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Can't be any better than this." Next thing I know, he's with the mayor. Long short of it is, he ended up. He has a beautiful family. We're still very close. He ran one of the largest foster care agencies in the state of Florida. He runs a huge foundation, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is this: when we go through struggles like that and we deal with things, I believe, for me at least, broadens our mind and saying, look, it's nothing wrong with people. And I keep saying this. Yes, it's great. You should be educated, become academic, but it's the grit. and all of that
Mhm.
that I believe matters more than anything. So I
Yeah,
could, right? I mean,
absolutely.
I had a feeling you agree with
Absolutely.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think just to kind of double down on that,
please,
when we also look across, the field of cyber, one of the most critical traits that we find and see as a success metric universally is curiosity. And, you talk about resilience, right? Well, in order to be resilient, it's not just about picking yourself up, right? That's a big piece of it.
sure,
But my goodness, you've got to have some curiosity built in you, or yet you work to get you to a place where you can think about doing something different, or that there's another way forward for you. And that curiosity trait just screams across the entirety of cyber, whether you are hands-on keys, forensic analyst, whether you are an executive running a consulting practice, whether you are, an in the trenches network engineer, whether you are in threat intelligence or threat analysis. I mean, the world of cyber is so big. And I even will extend that to when I look at the most successful leaders, whether they be in, politicians, leaders of, Fortune 500 companies to small startups, it's the same theme,
yeah.
curiosity. So I think that's a really important connection there.
I want to move a bit on to some of the talent gap. I know we went from like resilience and all that to the talent gap, but it is interesting. So I told you earlier, I started working at ThriveDX overseas 6 years ago, fell into it. There was, it was called HackerU at the time, small company, they had worked, overseas globally doing things and, decided move to the US. You know the story, but for folks that may not know, moved to the US, started partnering with universities and doing all of that. And there's like three or four of us, came here, and I've been fortunate to watch the growth of not only ThriveDX. It's about learning so much and watching. Look, everybody in this industry, I think, if they come at it genuinely and authentically, is making an impact. But I can speak from what we've done, and so I learned so much about the talent gap and cyber, and once I started getting into it, I got so excited because wow, there's so many opportunities here to build a workforce that is the face of America, right? To open the door to people that never maybe had the opportunity to go to school, and wow, we can change. I mean, I'm thinking broadly, we can change education in this country because it's finally time. And cyber is really because of the opportunities that exist. Cyber, I don't, nobody talks about this, but cyber's on the forefront of changing higher education in this country. Nobody talks about it. That's what I'm talking about. And it's amazing. So my mind's going like this. I'm seeing all of this, and the sky is the limit, but still, and this is the question, you're talking about the shortage, right? You're talking about, I think, God, the numbers, generally consistent, but I think there's maybe 500,000 open cybersecurity jobs in the US, something like that. And there's so much attention on this. I mean, come on, or I think so, at least it seems to be the ONCD, right? The White House plans. I mean, I can tell you, Barbara, you already know this, but baffled sometimes with all the
Yeah.
attention and everything going on. And I'll throw this out there and I'll ask you the question, but maybe we're not doing a good enough job. I'm saying as a whole, because with all this attention, and I'm putting you on the spot here. I don't, you may not know the answer, right? It's like, how do you solve the Middle East peace process? I don't know, but all joking aside, there's so much attention on it. For at least from your perspective, why do you think there's such a shortage? And more importantly, how do we fix this?
Yeah, it's great question.
Right.
So, I'm encouraged that there is such attention on it, and I certainly think from our view has been a significantly increased attention on this the world over in the last even just kind of 3-4 years.
Sure.
So this is not a new problem that has just surfaced overnight, but I guess I start with I'm glad that there's the attention that is on it. and that we hear and see and read about every day. Yeah, you're right. There on any
Yeah.
given day is between, 4 and 600,000, unfilled cyber jobs, broadly speaking, across the Americas. If you stretch that and you include, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Japan, you can add another, couple million to that count all in when you look globally. So A or B, I should say, this is certainly not a U.S. only sort of
Yeah.
shortage.
Of
This
course.
is clearly something we're all facing. I think there's a few reasons. One, if we just look at the pace of innovation, change, what bad actors can do in our connected world, which has moved at such a brisk pace in the last decade, look at everything that's available to bad actors. We live online. We transact
I mean,
online, we buy online, we bank online, and we develop products online, everything, right? So I think the inflection of what we do, broadly speaking, on the internet and all of the connected devices has born an environment where there's a lot of stuff that people that want to do harm in this world want to get after. And so, I think if we then look at and go, okay, there's a lot for bad actors that want to have financial gain. There is a lot of bad actors that are looking to do harm at a nation state level. You can kind of look at between cyber terrorism, cyber crime, ransomware, everything around, the environment. Um, it's all there. So, when we look at then why there is such a dearth of cyber talent, it's because the pace of what what we've put out there has then allowed the bad actors to also innovate at a very brisk pace.
yeah.
So that's that's kind of it's why we are where we are now. When we think about the ways to close the gap, I don't know that we'll ever move into a place where we could say there's a true fix,
No,
because
never.
I feel like it's a constant chicken and the egg kind of scenario. However, you look at what companies like ThriveDX are here to do. They're here to help bring a much broader base of talent and people and provide access to even thinking about a career in cyber that might think, and be either financially off limits because this is somebody that maybe can't, afford a 4-year, degree. And I'll talk about that. Maybe it's somebody who doesn't think because, you don't have this technical aptitude. Well, I can't go contribute to the world of cyber because I don't code, or, I'm
Right?
not, this super techie, wear a hoodie all day long. But my goodness, the world of cyber is so much bigger than that. So companies like ThriveDX, I think, are, clearly a big part of what is the potential solution to getting more people, A, interested, B, having access, and C, actually getting educated and, moving into the world of cyber. So that's certainly one critical way. We can talk about more, but that's a big one.
So I wanted to talk maybe for a moment about somebody's out there, right? Maybe I don't know. I give you maybe they're knee deep in something else. Maybe they're at a high level IT, but maybe they're working at Best Buy. Whatever it is, they want to get into this field. They want to pivot. They've heard about cyber. You know how it is. Scared. That not in a position where they're happy now, but like everything else in life, you're scared, right? At least. But let's be realistic. We live in a new world. We see what's happening with the economy. It's going to get better, obviously, but the reality is, with AI and everything, we have to shift our mentalities. What would you tell somebody, and what advice would you give to them? Of maybe how to approach all this. I know it's a broad question, but
Yeah, I mean, I think, first and foremost, I would just encourage somebody who's interested in the world of cyber is, go dig around on, firstly, look at who you already know. Do you
sure,
already have some existing relationships or contacts with people who are in the industry? Sometimes we don't even know, like, who are the parents of our, kids' friends, and you probably don't have to look too far for somebody who's touching the world of cyber.
of
So,
course.
I would start there. Go have some conversations. if there aren't people that are directly in cyber, I'll bet you within 1 or 2 degrees of, relationships that are around you, you probably can find some folks. So I'd start there. The second thing that I would do is educate yourself on the careers in cyber. There's some great resources out there. The SANS Institute has a really great curated kind of career ladder and
Right.
job descriptions and position overviews. And they're kind of universally understood to be the framework of what we all look at when we kind of refer to the different parts of a career in cyber. So I go read, go do a little education on, what does it mean to be in, this type of a cyber job? And, I'll draw a story here for just a moment. The world of cyber is so big. At my last company, Mandiant, we had an incredible infosec team, information security team that obviously was looking after, our own crown jewels of the organization. And, they were really creative when it came to the makeup of staff on their team. And yes, we had some absolute hardcore techies that really needed, depth of knowledge in certain places. But we had some that in the threat intelligence organization, they were former physicians, journalists, writers. We actually had a guitar player, like an expert guitar player who came into the organization. And what it was when you looked at what they were great at consuming large bits of information, finding storylines, finding trends. And I
Right.
don't mean storylines like a writer writing a story.
Sure.
That's obviously one. Um, but that was a trait and a capability that their other professions were, it was actually a very highly tuned capability that they had. All they had to do was pivot that and apply it to cyber, and a light bulb went off because that's exactly what we needed them to do in this big world of threat intelligence. So I just share that story because it was a completely different sort of background, and that was a pivot into the world of cyber in that kind of piece of it. So I'd start with education, I'd start with networking, I'd start with having conversations, learn a little bit more, about the jobs that make up, and start having some dialogue. And I think that can kind of hone people into more of the specific avenues to choose.
If we can get people to understand that, like you said earlier, this industry is broad, right? And there's something for everybody to do. I think that, we'd be in a much better, situation. And that's what leads me to the next part I wanted to talk about, which is diversity. And most people, when they hear diversity, they hyper focus on something political or traditional, which is insane. But there's a lot of reasons for that. But diversity can mean many things. Speaking to the audience, not to you, of course, but Tim Romer, who I believe of course. So Tim, does a lot of work with us, with you guys, and then and Tim, the first episode we did with Tim. So Tim was on and he talked about, the need for diversity, which we all talk about, right? We all speak that language. And like I said, a hot button topic. It's become contentious politically, which it should never be. But he meant it as being, a diversity of backgrounds and perspectives, right? I mean, yes, there's race, there's all different things, but it's not just that. It's backgrounds and perspectives. So when you look at the industry, I already know you think it's important, but why and how and all the thing. What do you think about diversity
Yeah.
and more broadly is, I guess, what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think diversity by, definition of the world, or word, I should say, is just that. It is a diversity of experiences. It's a diversity of, what you grew up with and what, culture surrounded you. It is, I mean, you talk about faith and religion and ethnicity and sexual orientation and experiences, and then intersections of all of these different elements. It's so important because the world of cyber and those that seek to do harm in this connected world are diverse. And
Right.
so if
Yeah.
you think about, we need to bring the absolute best and broadest minds and perspectives and experiences to the table to combat and bring forth solutions, capabilities, products, technologies, responses, etc., to meet and hopefully advance our capabilities in that arena. And so, to me, it's just such a simple reason why it's important. And it can be frustrating when, like you said, folks look at it and turn what is such a positive connotation into something that has, a negative element to it. It's simple. Those that want to do harm in cyber are diverse. In order for us to do everything we need to do, we got to bring the best of everything we can. And that's my story.
And and,
And
yeah,
and one thing, sorry to cut you off, Fred, I
no,
know we both
please,
share passion for this, is,
no.
it
We both
extends
have a lot
to,
of passion. I love it. Yeah,
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 it
yeah.
extends to, neurodiversity. We need, creative minds and thought processes and capabilities that, in some instances are shaped differently. And my goodness, we need more of that in cyber. So,
And life's, I want to talk about this for a moment. For me, this gets me excited. And I'll tell you, first of all, what do they say? So one of my favorite quotes, right? Everyone's a genius. Let me see if I remember it correct. Everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And I say that because my personal experience, I don't know if neurodiverse is a new word, but I am certainly neurodiverse. Uh, I have had a significantly amazing trajectory. Like, sometimes I feel like an imposter syndrome and I freaking hit the bottom as hard as they come because it depends on how the world understands you. And so I say this because, and I'm getting to a point here, when I was young, and I hope this is okay, but I really think this is an important conversation, especially because I can speak to it personally. So when I was in elementary school, I remember, right, ADD as hell, really smart, big heart, not malicious at all, but just very rigid back then, right? You're talking about the 80s, early 80s. People didn't understand it. They wanted you to fit into a cookie cutter box, et cetera, et cetera, all the stuff we know. And folks who are neurodiverse have a mind that, I'm not saying I'm brilliant, believe me, I don't mean it like that, but very creative. So I don't know your experience, but we all are impacted. I think we're all on the spectrum in some ways, but we're all impacted, whether it's our kids, whether somebody, we've been around it. So my point being is that I know my brain, I have a lot of things I am poor at, regular things, life skills, normal stuff, that kind of stuff. But my brain is very creative and I see strategies and I see angles. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation, but I can see things about people that everybody would miss. So my strength is when somebody gets that right and they let me operate in my way, whether it's staying up all night, you get it, and all of that. But then, and I want to say this too, if somebody is in a situation where, like I said, with the fish, right? So wrong seat, wrong place, and then they're giving a hard time, whether it's at work, wherever it is, we're not doing a service. So I'll end this. I'll finish on this. In Denver, I forget the name of the school, some years ago, they started a program for folks who are autistic, right? Now, autistic kids have a incredible mind to get into cyber. So starting these programs, and I guess my point is that you're starting to hear this more, neurodiverse, and I'm hoping, Barbara, that it's not like a passing phase, because I believe the world would be so much better from a work. We'd be so much more successful if folks took the time to understand that, because the sky's the limit with those folks. And I know they'll probably cut some of this, by the way, because I'm talking too much, but just if you want to speak on that for a moment, and we'll move to the next, because you have experience at NightDragon, I'm sure, and other companies. You've been with people who have been in similar situations, I would imagine.
yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's just a universal yes,
Right.
from my seat. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, universal yes. You need the creativity of, again, the minds and perspectives, and it some of the absolute brightest minds in cyber, I think come from some element of neurodiversity. So just amen, and we got to keep cultivating programs that bring people into the field,
Yeah.
and also support them in the organizations, because people might need a little different support. And
Yep.
we, as leaders of companies, need to be really thoughtful about that.
And it's
So
and not just the
couldn't
support.
agree
I mean,
more.
they can take a company to the next level, right? Like anything. I mean, it's just
100%.
understanding it. And I love that you say that. And I just think that the sky's the limit in this case. But let's talk. That leads me into something, and I want to just touch on it for a moment because you had talked about it. You know, this leads right into it: a career ladder versus a career lattice. I mean, this is exactly right what we're talking about in a sense, right? Figuring out. I'll let you talk about that. Your
Yeah.
experience. I mean, that's how you operate in a sense, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that, I often get asked just about, how do people grow in their careers, broadly speaking. I think this absolutely applies to cybersecurity, full stop. But just generally, and my answer is always, along the lines of, I think we are taught to think of things in a hierarchical fashion. If you think about a career, okay, I start at a junior level and then I go to this level and then I go to a senior level and then I go to the next level. And I think the most successful careers that I've seen, and it's certainly been my experience, are ones that have an appreciation for building horizontally as well as building vertically. And, you not only need to be, kind of a master of your own domain and really good at, quote, the job you've got today. But, I think it does your own career a disservice to think, well, gosh, I'm not going to go stretch myself horizontally and go try this project, or let me just go dip my toe in the water of this initiative that I don't really know much about that field or that function. Um, and let me just go try it. Let me go make some relationships with people that do that. Let me go put my hand up and say, hey, I got a couple extra hours a week. Let me go contribute to that so that I can learn more horizontally before expecting that you are naturally just going to go up the chain. So I think I start with that. And that's why, the words I use are more of a career lattice. You think about how ivy grows, and creeps up, or wisteria or whatever, if you happen to be, a botanist or, an arborist. You kind of want to have those leaves crawl up, horizontally as well as vertically. And along the way, you kind of figure out what you're really great at and what do you love to do. And ultimately, if your objective is to be a leader of people, well, then at some point that opportunity will be put in front of you. But if you have purposefully gone and grown yourself horizontally, by the time that, hey, go be a leader of people comes around, you've prepared yourself with a broader foundation to stand on.
I think our responsibility as leaders is to help people feel good that they can do that. They don't understand that.
Absolutely.
Like give them like the gift to allow them to do that. As long as it's the bottom lines. And I think that's where we can be most helpful because as we get older, we have a responsibility. And sometimes people don't like this, but we do. But we are running out of time and I want to get to a couple more things. And number one, because we didn't get into this, I mean, your role at NightDragon, how did you end up there as the COO? And then I guess just broadly, what does it look like day to day? How do you support the portfolio companies and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm now in a little bit of a jack of all trades kind of role,
Yeah,
which
well,
I
that makes
love.
sense.
And so I guess it's got a healthy dose of the lattice element that I just spoke about.
Sure.
So really, what does this mean? I mean, as a COO, part of it is basically helping run the firm. What can we
Yeah.
do to, help the business go and flow on a day-to-day basis? I think most importantly is the work that we do in service to our portfolio companies. And so on any given day, that could show up and take a bunch of different, forms. It could be I coach a couple of our CEOs. And so being, an objective sounding board, somebody who's been an executive for 30 years and, got a lot of operating experience. We've got, 20 companies in and around our NightDragon portfolio that are at varying stages of their own experience. And sometimes you just want some advice and counsel and sounding
Yeah.
board. So that's one. I mentioned the NightScale platform, which extends across lots of ways that we engage. One of those is on the talent front. So sometimes, we're looking and we partner with those companies to go help them find and network great executives and people to join their
Yeah.
organization. So, clearly that gets some share of my time. There's a lot of other aspects that we're always diligencing new investment opportunities and seeing, where else can we go find great companies to deploy capital. So I spend a lot of my time, out there with, founders and CEOs and learning, hey, is this a good fit? Could this be an investment, forthcoming for NightDragon? So on any given day, it could be, 80% of my time is spent with one company. It could be 1% of my time is spent with, 10 companies
Sure.
and everything in between. So I feel like I've got the best
But
job on the planet.
but look at that smile, and I'm serious when I say that. How many people don't feel like that, and that's because we don't do a good job helping them with career lattice. But you're happy. I mean, I don't know your whole life. I don't want to. But on the surface, the smile when you talk about it, because it's very hard to fake those kind of things. And
Absolutely.
and I think I could feel it, and I think there's nothing more satisfying in life. Well, I think one of the most important things is because we spend so much time working, right? And to be in a situation where we're not feeling, and you have that freedom. You have a good, I imagine you surround yourself with amazing people, right? So look,
Mhm.
as a leader, so you have the freedom to go do the things while, they're getting different initiatives done. And I see the smile on your face. So it makes me very
Yeah.
happy to see that. So on that
That's
note,
great. Well,
right? Let,
thank you. I have a
I,
terrible poker face, so
Me too. By the way,
I
I have the
yeah.
worst poker face. I don't. Yeah, right? Exactly. You're gonna know, right? If you're pissed off, they're right. Somebody's gonna know. So, uh,
Exactly.
really quickly, I'm sure that NightDragon has a million initiatives to, well, not a million, but to develop cyber security talent. You want to just quickly go over those with me? And
Yeah, again, we're so appreciative of, the partnership with Thrive DX and, what we're doing here today. And I think what the company is really here to do an impact in the world. I think in addition to that, we have made a really intentional effort to partner with MSAs, so master service agreements.
right,
And we put a bunch in place with organizations and companies that prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in an effort to close the cyber talent gap. We launched the Coalition to Close the Cybersecurity Talent Gap in partnership with NextGen.
right. I saw
I think
that.
it's
Yeah,
Next Gen Cyber Talent. Sorry, let me
right.
give them full credit
Yeah,
for the full name. And raised over $1 million towards cyber education. We recently collaborated with Cisco and WWT on a partnership at RSA to help drive talent diversity within cyber. So we, kind of got behind that in a big way. Obviously, the investment, like I mentioned, in partnership with companies like Thrive DX, we're really looking to do more of what can we do with our investing dollars, in the world of cyber talent. And, down to something tactical, like we chose to partner with a couple of really top class recruitment partners, Aspira Search and Intasso, that also prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion in the search work that they do. So a few high points, lots more
yeah.
we could talk about, but those are a few biggies.
And just very quickly, because I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. AI, AI and cyber, how are they merging? And let me tell you something. Where do you see it? Without a crystal ball, how is AI and cyber going to work together? I think we're already seeing some of it. So yeah,
Yeah. So I think one, let me start with the good. So,
yeah, please, right, exactly. Right. Better to start with the
here I
good.
here
Yeah,
I am, the
right,
eternal
exactly.
optimist, right?
Right. You're
Um, you
fired,
know,
but here's the good. No, I'm kidding. Right, 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 right,
Yeah.
right,
I think, first of all,
right,
artificial intelligence, generative AI, broadly, can be what we would call the defender's advantage. So, there's, organizations, companies, solutions, technologies that are using this for good. And it's, helping automate tasks, large scale data insights, things that took a huge amount of human compute to be able to do that work. And now, we as defenders can use that same, automation and capability so that we can use our human compute capabilities and hopefully creative brilliance on those higher stack order, elements to defend, our ultimately our nation, our companies, and our architectures. So, with that, it's a double-edged sword. It does expand the capability of bad actors to do the same, right? They can use the same technology and put more,
Sure.
compute power out there to do the exact opposite of what I've described. Resilience is a really big deal. We see, breaches that, occur on a daily basis. So that ability to come back from and be resilient in your operations is a big one. AI can play a huge role in helping organizations, speed up that resilient posture. Um, AI has expanded the attack surface through things like prompt injection and manipulating inputs and producing harmful outputs and, things of that nature. So again, using it to help defend that larger attack
Right.
surface is where the cyber practitioners, I think many of their practitioners' minds are. So, we're all concerned about, vulnerabilities in open source
Sure.
and proprietary software. The application of AI. We've actually got a couple companies in our portfolio. One of them being Interos is one where their business is resiliency and how can you use those large language capabilities and models to then actually go in and understand what that vulnerability is
Right.
and do something to remediate it and remediate it. So
And
those are just
yeah,
those are just a few.
on that note, I'm not going to leave you yet. I want to hear from you. If there's one thing that I don't care if it's personal, work wise, because whoever creates these lines, really, what do you want to leave to the world, to the audience?
Oh, there's so much.
Besides $1 million, you owe
Yeah,
me for this. Right. I'm waiting on the check, but yeah,
yeah, there you go.
right. Yeah.
I would say be curious,
Yeah.
curious. I think this stretches into, our personal lives, our professional lives. Clearly, the world of cyber, I feel such a connection to success in cyber, and the new world order, requires us to be curious. But I also just think from a humankind perspective, we don't know what anyone else is going through on any given day. And if you kind of take the moment to just be curious about people and what's going on with them, I think, we need to work at being kind humans first and foremost. And I think it really stems from simply being curious about, people and the world around us. So please be curious and stay curious.
I can say amen to that because for me, I said cynical idealist. What did you say earlier? You use something else for yourself?
Eternal optimist.
Exactly. And 100%. The rest of it is BS. And I say that seriously. Human beings, what we contribute to them, how we can make their lives better, doesn't mean we diminish ourselves. And thank you for that. So I will say this again, Barbara, great segment. Loved it. We'll do it again. I want to say to everybody else, again, thank you for coming. For other folks, before we say goodbye, I just want to say, please come to our different our websites. Come to ThriveDX, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. You can listen on Spotify, on my God, I can't remember all these platforms: Apple, iHeart, Amazon. And Barbara, how can they find ThriveDX? My God, how can they find NightDragon? There's a website. What's the website?
Absolutely. It's pretty simple. NightDragon.com.
Here you go. Look
Easy,
at that.
easy.
Right. If I did anything right today, it was that, right? Simple thing. Okay. Well, again, thank you all, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Barbara, thanks again.
Thank you, Fred.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Now, are you interested in learning more about becoming a cybersecurity professional or how to better secure the future of your organization? Visit thrivedx.com for more details and make sure you follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, for updates, info, and more. And before we go, I want to thank everyone who helped make this possible. My dynamic executive producer, Michael Seth Prell. Our producer and publicist, Carrie Ann Hilton. The design and original music was done by Gilly Fox, Ksenia Aron, and Moro Hanna. Our editors, Modi Nachum and Amit Zach. Our advisor, Yoni Neiman, and our manager, Liora Zeri. And the entire operation was overseen by Eugenio Robino Writer at ThriveDX. Thanks to this incredible team. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Fred Menachem, 0 to 60 and nothing in between. We'll see you in the next episode.